Please take your seats, everyone. We are about to start our next session. Okay. Hello again. My name is Desire Kachenje, and I am part of the Core Develop team. I am very excited and extremely honored to have all of you here. I know it's quite late in the afternoon, so really appreciate you spending time with us today. At Core Develop, we are supporting a number of countries to accelerate the deployment of digital public infrastructure. And because of this, we work with a variety of stakeholders. And we thought that it was important for us to discuss how do we bring all these different stakeholders together and how do we create more collaborative ecosystem. And that will be our discussion this afternoon. In the past few years, we have seen the push for deploying safe and inclusive digital public infrastructure, and we've also seen how they can not only help in saving lives, but they also do support us in attaining the sustainable goals. However, as we're learning a little bit more about DPIs, we're understanding that there's some fundamentals that if are not put in place, DPIs are not rolling out and achieving the potential that we are hoping they could achieve. So if we look at the learnings and case studies in countries such as Estonia or India, we see that we need public-private partnerships in order to ensure that DPIs are not only sustainable, but they're also scalable. We need the public sector to come in and create policies and guardrails that will protect some of the platforms that are being rolled out. But then at the same time, we also need the private sector to constantly innovate so that we are actually meeting the citizens' needs. And that's why our conversation today is so important. So how do we harness private sector innovation in DPIs, but also how do we build collaborative ecosystems? And to do this, I have a fantastic panelist, and I will be introducing one by one. I hope they could take a seat as soon as I mention their name, starting with Sim Sikut, the managing partner at Digital Nation, where he focuses on empowering change makers and building future-ready digital societies. We also have Subhashin Chandran, who's the Senior Vice President of Social Impact at the MasterCard Center of Inclusive Growth, which is a social impact hub at MasterCard, both at Asia Pacific, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. We also have Justin Spellhog, the corporate vice president and the founder of the Tech for Social Impact business within Microsoft Philanthropies, which aims to accelerate digital transformation of non-profits, United Nations organizations, and social entrepreneurs. We also have Rami Amin, who is the Global Director of Innovation at Visa, where he leads research initiatives to drive product innovation and support financial inclusion. We also have Tamara Stechnick, who has led Open Government Data and Digital Services Reform Initiative as part of the California government team, and she will tell us a little bit more about her career there. So before we actually dive into the panel discussion, we thought it would be great to hear about a journey of how a country successfully was able to build a collaborative ecosystem. And so I want to welcome Sim, where he will take us through the Estonia journey and talk about how the private-public partnership there was able to become a catalyst for their digital ID as well as their digital data exchange platform, which we're all learning about right now. Sim, over to you.
Thank you so much. And you are all the brave ones who are still here. My compliments. Look, it's lovely to be here. Thank you really for CodeDevelop for hosting this, and I'm sorry my panel that I'm facing backwards. But I'm very happy to share a bit of Estonian journey, which I had the privilege to be part of as the Government Chief Information Officer of Estonia for a few years. One of these days, the slides are going to appear as well, but let me start talking. In Estonia, we have been, as a country, as a government, on a digital path since the end of 90s. You know, that's the time when internet started to take off in the world. Why? Well, very frankly, long story short, we are very small. For us, doing things digitally was the only way how to be a full, proper country, really. To be efficient, that was our way to achieve more, have enough sort of public spending to go around and so forth. Estonia today is at a stage where almost anything and everything you want to do or you need to do with the government, you can do digitally as a citizen, entrepreneur, or inside government as an official. The only exceptions you still have to show up for is to get married and divorced. So everything else can be fully online. To get to that point, to go through that sort of journey of having everything become digital, at least when government and bureaucracy is concerned, Estonia's story and journey of that is a DPI story. It's been built on platforms, on DPI building blocks that really made this all possible at that accelerated and large-scale pace. So building blocks exactly like digital identity and signatures to go along with it, data exchange platform, many of you have heard about X-Road, and so forth. And indeed, these DPI building blocks would not have been possible if we had not employed public-private partnership for this. Mind you, if I say public-private partnership, I don't necessarily mean in a legal construct. I don't necessarily mean in a procurement sense. I really mean partnership, collaboration. So if I could use one example, digital identity, then the sort of lesson that I have always drawn from there, and these days I work with a number of governments around the world as an advisor, the lesson I draw from there was that Estonian digital identity became possible because we built up a coalition of public and private entities that then made identity possible. And let me say a few more words about that. Basically, nobody in Estonia, late 90s, especially the government, had enough money to do it on their own. We needed to pool resources. In government, we didn't have enough talent to do proper, secure authentication for the whole country, for the whole government. We needed to pool talent. So that's how we built up a coalition between the banks, the telcos, the government, to really do it as a joint effort. And I still say not as a sort of legal construct of vendorship, but open partnership. Everybody's understood as something in it for them. The banks wanted to be, for example, also providing their services through digital channels as the government. So we built up a coalition, and by pooling of these resources, now you get to the point where, today every transaction in the country happens digitally, is signed digitally, whether it's B2B, B2C, government to government, whatever. So the story that I have here, I think the lesson that I would draw is that build coalitions with those whose resources you can tap into. That's a way to speed up DPI adoption. The other lesson from data exchange and X-Road story is build up and leverage communities. Use open innovation. So X-Road, which now not only is the basis for the whole of digital government of Estonia, but 25 or more countries around the world, X-Road was a master's thesis in a university. From that, people started exchanging, techies, engineers started to elaborate this. A group of them got together, sketched it out, how it could work in a government setup, and openly built up what then became infrastructure for the country through a lot of experiments, years of work, and so forth. But my point being, we embraced ideas in the community. We had problems to solve in government, integration. We embraced ideas that were basically out there to use, and then we built them forward with that. Yes, of course, down the line we also had vendors come in, we had procurement that helped to build it out, but it was sketched out, conceptualized through this open innovation approach. So my lesson here, for me at least, is that if you want to, again, to DPI adoption strong and well, leverage and build the communities. Build those communities whose insights you can bring in. Whether it's the academia, whether it's the private sector, there's a lot of resource out there, and including other countries. Now, from this, I think there's also a bit of bitter lesson, and that's my last point that we learned through the years. So if building coalitions and if building communities can accelerate your journey, these things also don't stand by themselves. Communities and coalitions need to be managed and taken care of and nurtured, possibly from government side, for example. So my point being that if you just leave them idle, they fall apart. Quite a few years later, as these coalitions were not nurtured, they fell apart in Estonian case, for example, and digital identity became a government thing only. And through that, the foundations got weaker for a while, and then we had to rebuild that. So my point being, and an advice we now give to governments around the world, is that leverage your ecosystems, build them into coalitions, manage and steer them as a community. That's how you become stronger. That's how you also have more sustainable DPI in the end. I will end here with these remarks. We'll do more in the panel, and I thank you for this small attention for Estonia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would just request if we could get an extra chair for seat. Okay, thank you very much. I think gathering from what we've just heard from Seema, I would then want to welcome Subhashin. If you could speak a little bit more on your work on MasterCard. I know that you did a great job in bringing together almost 1.2 million SMEs into the digital economy. And we'd like to hear from you. How did you do that? And what do you think we can do to maximize the partnerships between different private sector and public sector when it comes to building DPI?
Thank you, Desire. It's great to be here and to be with this fabulous panel. I think, I'd like to take a step back because I was reflecting on a lot of what I heard this morning, and the conversations today have been so much about a point that Neely made, and I was talking to Sim about that, about really sharing lessons and building trust through collaboration, and Estonia's experience in the context of X-Road. So I just wanted to lay that out as an overarching, point and message for, I think, our 3 days of dialogue here. In terms of DPIs and public-private partnerships, our work at MasterCard has been, for a long time, for 10 years at the center, which is the philanthropic hub, about driving financial inclusion for particular segments of underserved populations, small businesses and women. And from that, I think lifting up to the conversation on DPI that we want to have today and PPPs, I think where we are seeing a need for more work is long-term alignment on what the shared outcomes are that we're after. So if we're going to build the bridge from where we are at with our work to being able to feed in through public-private partnerships, which is really the theme of this conversation, I think it would be helpful to really take a more long-term view, align together on what the outcomes are that we're after, and then think about how we play to strengths. Because I think as it stands, we don't necessarily play to the strengths of all ecosystem players, and I think we can probably do a better job there. Because at the end of the day, all of us have the consumer at the heart of our decision-making. And we wear different hats, but we are all user-centric. It's just that we have different strengths that help us inform how we design for users. The second thing I'll say is that I think we also need more systems that cut across public and private with ownership and activities across both, because in the absence of those systems, it also becomes challenging to figure out where are points in which that we as private sector can engage, right? You mentioned innovation. I think the precursor to innovation is investment. I think if you want to look at PPP models, there are enough models that are well established and robust and running. Estonia is a great example. We have a wonderful example in PIX in Brazil. But I do think that to rally more private investment, we need to do it early so that innovation is baked into system design, and also definitely more efficiency. And I think to really make the case for private sector involvement, I think a good example of why we're well placed to lead on innovation comes from large payment networks, right? We have incredible data insights, for example, that can truly inform design and delivery of sustainable services, that can also shape consumer behavior and preferences. And these are important elements that not all actors in a system can do. So I'll just some opening points there, and then we can continue the conversation.
Thank you. you very, very much. I really liked how you put it, and I want to talk a little bit about, you said long-term alignment, and I think that's one of the things we want to talk about today, because we can build ecosystems, but if we're not maintaining them over the long term, we do face some challenges. And here I would like to welcome Justin. I am very interested to hear about what you do at Microsoft, but also we spoke a little bit about the different stakeholders that you work with when it comes to building collaboration, especially in DPI. So we talk about digital public infrastructure platforms and the key stakeholders there. We also have digital public goods, and we also have this specific class which is talked about quite often right now called system integrators. So if you discuss a little bit about all of those and, you know, the type of work that you do in causing collaboration and innovation with those three people will be very interesting.
Sure, and it's great to be on this panel, and it's great to be with the hardcore people here at 5:15 p.m. For digital public infrastructure, so thank you for staying with us. Justin Spellhog, I lead the Tech for Social Impact team, so we support globally all the nonprofits, the United Nations system, as well as social entrepreneurs, and look at how do we accelerate innovation for the global majority and bring digital equity. That's what we do for a living. Serve about 400,000 organizations around the world, and we'll discount and donate in the last year about 4.7 billion. So we're starting to get some scale. I thought I knew what DPIs and DPGs were before I came into this meeting, and then I started having a debate with many of the folks out there, and I may have confused myself, but you know, certainly the traditional definitions here for DPGs are, you know, solutions that are built for specific use cases using open source software, open data, open content, open standards, and conforming to specific standards, distinct from DPIs, right, which are population scale technologies, society-wide transformational technologies, identity, payments, data exchange, all fit within that definition. And system integrators, to your question, can be partners like KPMG or E&Y. Those are two classic system integrators that can deliver this technology, but also mix and mash it with commercial technology for specific and appropriate use cases. That's the technical answer, but I think the non-technical answer is this. When I came in and I saw the morning sessions, I feel like this is less than a technical discussion, more of a discussion around a movement of like-minded people, like-minded partners, trying to figure out how to bring technology partnerships together to create fair, inclusive, and safe digital transformation for societies around the world. That's what I think this really is at the end of the day. So, you know, what can private sector do? I think we're going to hear from our esteemed panelists, but, you know, certainly bringing innovation both in business models like MasterCard and Visa are doing, bringing innovation in technology models. I'll talk about that in a moment. Bringing partnerships to the table, as you mentioned, public-private partnerships, and bringing capital and capacity building services as well. At Microsoft, we're focused on doing three specific things, just to be clear on our DPI strategy. First is really providing infrastructure to do the work. So GitHub, where most of this is published, Visual Studios, a lot of it is built on running in the cloud and AI infrastructure where we need to enable DPIs with AI. But we also have a number of pieces of work, value-add pieces of work, to provide open data and open AI models, whether it's human genome, open data models, it's environmental sustainability with what we call the planetary computer open data models, or our open AI models for disaster response or any range of topics. We have a wide range of models that can be used, pulled, and mixed and matched into a DPI or DPG construct. So that's the first piece. The second piece is we've really been focused on trying to make it easier for communities and countries to deploy and use DPIs and DPGs, both, by building one-click deployment models, sandbox models to test and try this out, by bringing new partnerships forward with KPMG and E&Y, who are prepared to partner with countries, creating deployment best practice guides. So all that hopefully takes some of the friction out of it. And then finally, we've been working on our own innovation in our team, in my team, in Microsoft Research. The tag name, please, it's not a new product, but my little tag name is the Inclusion Stack, and I'll talk about that here in a few minutes in terms of the key capabilities that we'll be bringing to market.
Wow, I wish you started with that because I have so many follow-up questions. But I think we have a good movement here, starting with, you know, MasterCard and then going to Visa. So, going to Microsoft. And now I want to move to Visa. And with the discussion with you, Rami, I want to zoom in a little bit more closer. So we differentiated DPGs from DPIs and system integrators. There are the terms that I use, and I think when we're discussing DPI deployment and really building an ecosystem, it's important that everybody understands some of the terms that we usually use. The way that Justin has put it, that this is a movement, I think it's true. Now, in a movement, there's some terminologies that we all need to have this, be on the same page on. And I think based on your work, I would like to hear a little bit more what you do at Visa, the discussions that you have when it comes to innovation, but more specifically, when we speak about digital payment systems, there is this word called interoperability. And it sounds very easy when you talk about it. In theory, it's very easily explained, but in practice, it's very complex. So if you could speak about its role and when it comes to collaboration, and if there's any research around or insights that could help people understand that better, please, it would be great to hear.
I'd love to. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to participate on this panel. Thanks to the organizers for setting up this session, and huge thanks to Egypt for being the hosts for this session. So you gave an introduction of me at the top of the hour, but you left out one important part, that I actually started my career in international development in this country, working in villages in Upper Egypt, about 4 or 5 hours south of here, roughly halfway between Cairo and the Sudan border. And that was fresh out of college. I just trained as an engineer, and I wanted to do great things and have social impact. So hugely formative impact on my career trajectory, coming out from a very small NGO, dealing with challenges at the last mile of development work, and trying to think about some of those challenges I face and how we address them in larger organizations that have far greater scale. And so that experience in Egypt, it's almost like coming full circle now, back to Egypt, where since then I've gone off to work in academia to think about development issues. I've gone off to work at the World Bank to think about development issues from the finance side, and now in industry where I sit in Visa. And I've got a pretty cool job, I think, at Visa. I sit in the innovation team, and I focus on DPI. We have digital public infrastructure within my remit embedded right in the innovation teams. For those of you who work in industry, or for those of you who might not work in industry, I'll share with you, it's actually pretty unusual to have that sort of remit embedded within an innovation team that is focused on primarily staffing with engineers, with solution architects, with designers, and so on. So a big part of my job is to take lessons learned from, well, summits like this, but also a lot of the partners that we work with and the different perspectives that we have from international organizations, from governments, from civil society, on what is digital public infrastructure, why does it matter, where is it going, and most importantly, for an innovation team, what are the new opportunities? DPI is here, and it's evolving fast. And if you want to innovate, you're not so interested in policies and regulations and what the rules are. If you're an engineer, you just want to know, what are the new frictions? What are the new pain points? What are the new problems in these DPI ecosystems in different countries? What's great about being an innovation team is it's just made up of problem solvers. You throw it at a challenge, and they immediately want to figure out what a viable solution might be. So this is a really interesting time to be thinking about innovation within the DPI era. Another big part of my remit, alongside innovation at Visa, is doing the research to inform that product innovation. So at Visa, we have a think tank, a research institute called the Visa Economic Empowerment Institute, and it operates just like any other think tank that we have in Washington, where I'm based, like Brookings Institute and so on, where we have fellows, and we publish all of our research to the world. We include our data, our resources, our references, and we really look to feedback to these papers. We have a lot of insight that we want to share, and we're super keen to do it in very public ways like this. So another big part of my role is participating in some of that research. And I'll just raise, since you've asked for some specific examples, what are the challenges with doing research in this era? And I know I'm not the only one who's faced these challenges. I think there's a lot of people at this summit. I know when I was at the World Bank, we had the same issues of doing this research, and it boils down to data accessibility, data availability, and really understanding long-term impact of DPI ecosystems. Let me take each of those turns because they're two very different types of challenges for developing really robust empirical evidence bases. So on that first issue around data availability within DPI ecosystems, it's extremely challenging for researchers when you don't have granular access to transactions data beyond just large volume figures. We can't tell who's using the systems, what are their different demographics, and why is that so important? Because it's hard to see, are there groups who are still being left behind in DPIs? Some preliminary research that I know that we've looked at and others on the stage have looked at and have published has sort of illustrated that there are still groups in a lot of countries where we have great DPI ecosystems that are often referenced, where these groups are still not having needs met. They're still not using these systems and the different applications on top of these systems in the most optimal ways. And so for us, that is a huge issue. And to get even more granular, one specific data point that I think is hugely important for governments and others who can yield some more transparency is around fraud and security and operational resiliency of these systems. Fraud and cybersecurity is a perennially difficult issue to research because even far beyond the payment space, a lot of countries just don't publish that sort of data. It's really hard to aggregate and to measure. So this is a huge challenge with DPIs, and I welcome everyone to think about a future where if we did have transparency around fraud, around where fraud is coming, and the redress systems to approach these, we'd have innovation teams that focus on building the toughest cybersecurity measures to mitigate, as well as ways to address fraud within things like real-time payment systems and account-to-account transactions and so on. So that second major issue with research is one that has more to do with the temporal aspect, and it's about impact. As I talked about at the top of my intervention, I started my career at an NGO here in Egypt, and I'm very passionate about social impact, societal impact, community impact, far beyond individuals, and trying to draw connections between the rollout and the uptake of DPI ecosystems and direct causation of the kinds of economic development objectives that government has is extraordinarily challenging to do. Part of this is, again, a data issue, and another part of it is just we still haven't had enough time that you need on a temporal vector to really compare different systems and to see what causation looks like and move beyond correlation. So I'm incredibly optimistic. Of course, you have to be optimistic when you work in international development and you're interested in social impact. Otherwise, you will not make it in a career in international development. And I think this kind of summit is an amazing kind of platform and mechanism to begin to have these conversations and to realize it's not just us at Visa that's having these research gaps, it's all of my colleagues in academia who are facing the same gaps, my old colleagues at World Bank who are again facing the same data gaps to do their own impact assessments.
Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry, I didn't know that I left out such a crucial point, that you did start your career here. I'm sure a lot of people who are working here right now are very excited to hear about that. So before we move to the next panelist, I just want to dig in a little bit deeper. When it comes to collaboration, so you have spoken about the gaps, you've spoken about areas that we still need to work on. So how do we partner with Visa or the work that you do, just beyond research? Is there any innovation opportunities that, someone can come up to you and discuss? If people are having projects that they're working on currently in deploying digital public infrastructure, are there areas that they can count on you to come in and support?
Great question. I'm glad you brought it up. I think that there is a lot of really outdated ideas of thinking about what public-private partnerships look like. And I think within a DPI era, it's even more important than ever to reimagine new ways of these different stakeholders working together. If you think of the classic model being one of, and I'll be somewhat reductionist about one that often involves, a direct partnership for sales, and there's maybe oversight from one of the P's of the PPP, and the other P is producing the product. The kind of partnerships that we are exploring now at Visa, and that I'm super excited to bring more partners in on, is how can we collaborate to innovate together, to explore innovation and co-innovate together. Governments are beautifully positioned within the DPI era to know the different issues that their countries are facing at national scale and at smaller scales at the user levels for different demographics. But where the private sector can really add a lot to this knowledge and insight from the government side is really optimizing innovation as a process. And I think when you bring those players together in that model, I think it's incredibly exciting to think about what co-innovation might look like. Another area of partnership that I'm super keen to really lead at Visa, and it's been exciting to meet lots of others at this conference over just the last couple of days who are also keen to partner up, is partnering up on research. We are not a closed house at Visa. We are very keen to engage, just like policy think tanks and research institutes do, to collaborate with academia, to collaborate with international organizations, and to collaborate with other private sector entities such as Microsoft or the GSMA, which is here as well. For us, this is an incredibly exciting time to try to bring different data inputs that others might have access to and bring that all together to, again, come up with new insights that can help us innovate in a DPI era.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear that you're open to partner when it comes to research, because I don't know if it's just me, but a lot of us would not have immediately thought we could reach out to Visa for that. So thank you for pointing that out. So I would pose the same question to Justin. I think you raised something around inclusion stack. Very excited to hear just a little bit about that, and I think everyone who managed to stay till now at least is very excited to hear about that as well. And if there is any work that Microsoft is currently doing, any partnerships, and if there's something that you think everyone here should know if they're considering collaborating with Microsoft right now. Thank you.
Great. You sparked an idea, so I'll build on that. I'll first answer your question. So at Microsoft, we've got Microsoft research teams in India and Nairobi and China and in London and US, all creating amazing technology. They're publishing this technology, really focused on digital equity. But it's diffuse, and I doubt that anybody in the audience or anybody at Microsoft could figure out how to compile this in a way that makes sense to promote digital equity for a government, a country, a community. So part of the idea that we have is in this inclusion stack is really focusing on two key concepts: access and opportunity. And how do we create new technologies that facilitate access in low bandwidth environments in a hyper affordable way? And how do we create opportunity and jobs? So on the access side, we've got a couple, I'll just give two examples. There's more, but I'll give two examples. We've built a technology in MSR India called BlendNet. This uses low-cost satellite backbone to download and an intelligent edge network to stream content in a very low-cost way in low-bandwidth environments, allowing you to connect the last mile. In addition, we have the Airband initiative, where we're partnering with Liquid Telecom. We're using TV white space. We're using all kinds of technologies. And we made a commitment in Africa to connect 20 million households by 2025, and that's well on its way through Strive and the Liquid team who are doing amazing work there. As it relates to opportunity, we're thinking about two main capability areas, learning and earning. On the learning side, we have the Microsoft Community Training Platform. This is a lightweight learning management system to help you learn anything, anywhere. We've delivered 154 million courses, actually, through this platform already, through some really interesting public-private partnerships, including UNICEF in 30 countries in Africa, partnering with ministries of education, including in India, teaching safe sanitation, handling practices, in Singapore, teaching Grab taxi drivers entrepreneurial skills. So it's just a great example of an earning platform that we are moving towards open source and moving towards digital public good. And then from an earning perspective, there's a number of capabilities. We all know about all of these chatbots for farmers. We've built many of them. Many of them are good, but we're looking at how do we make them more intelligent with large language models? How do we make them hyper-specific to the context in providing access to government schemas, land information, climate information, seeding information, fertilizer, soil sample information, and that is coming online. We also have a new platform called Korea that allows, it's a digital work platform that's AI first, mobile first for lower resource communities. So all of these can come together, they can blend with and enhance a digital public infrastructure or a digital public good strategy. And it's just the beginning of the work we're doing in these areas. There's so many different opportunities. The one idea I had was it would be interesting to take an inventory of all of the different innovative partnerships that we have and produce a booklet for all of the countries, all of the communities looking to work with us so that it's a resource guide, like Learning Passport, but there are hundreds of different partnerships that we can make available to this community, I think.
Wow, thank you very much. I hope everyone is here has not only heard that, but has taken note of that. And I think I should note right now that Thursday, Justin and team will be moderating a similar conversation where they will be diving a little bit deeper on what is the role of private sector. So if you have any questions, if you want to build up on that conversation, please make sure you join. I think it's the first panel, 9:30 on Thursday, but also just reach out to him if you have any questions after this. So I think we've explored back and forth, and I want to go back to now, Seem, I know you have worked with governments, and now you're also working with private sector, and you've also played the role of advising each. So I just want to hear from you, apart from the things that have been mentioned, when it comes to gaps in research or when it comes to, more opportunities to innovate, what are the areas that you think we still have gaps when it comes to building strategies for partnerships, and what can we do to maximize the existing partnerships that are there?
Well, I think the two core challenges of any TPI are really where the gaps are. How do you scale the stuff? How do you make it viable to last, right? So, and for both of these, I see that actually, well, whether it's, exactly some of these great partnerships or new ones, but can be leveraged. For example, in terms of scaling stuff, I mean, if I just take a simple example, let's just stay within the confines of public sector for a second, right? So public services as a domain. What we sort of have found out from country to country is that often the resistance really comes obviously from within the public sector. Other entities don't want to come on board, right? They want to join the program of, I don't know, secure authentication or whatever. Now, it helps to have outside champions, of course, the lobbyists, the civic society, and so forth. But what we have also found that if it's not, let's say, a fundamental resistance against the stuff, it actually is a question of skills and awareness. Now, for that, what we have found to be an effective strategy is that build a vendor community. So if you're doing TPI, if you're doing whatever data exchange platform, whatever identity platform, for example, like that, educate your local vendor pool to actually be able to work with that and integrate that, and they become your champions as well, right? So if they are doing the next show for Ministry X, Y, Z, they actually already are on board with whatever is your program to really bring TPI on board, right? So that sort of, again, really like another type of coalition building. If I use my previous analogy, is what has been harnessed well. In Estonian case, that, for example, meant that we took literally the whole domestic tech industry to understand what X-Road is about. because whatever gets built in the government has to integrate with that data exchange platform, right? So, and that's how then you had no more of the, at least no more technical capability issue afterwards. Then you were able to just deal with political and other resistance, and that's a different story. But if you talk about scalability otherwise, and I think that really relates to my point about sort of viability or sustainability, how do you scale these things into wider society and wider economy, okay? And I mean, one thing is you try to build a coalition from the start, like I was saying. You know, you get the bigger players, the big digital transaction players on board, the financial providers, the telcos and others. Now, beyond that, how do you get the movie theater to use a national ID as an authentication module, okay? For that, the best thing we have seen is that these things don't happen by themselves naturally. You have to manage DPI as a product, possibly then from government or whoever is the owner side, and also sell it like that. And I mean sell in quotation marks, right? You have to actively do work to get the movie theaters or whatever sort of entities there are to adopt that into their setup as well, right? And make benefit of that. So in the case of data exchange platform, get the logistic change, right? To employ that for their data exchange and whatever. So these sort of aspects are often overlooked. Working with a vendor pool, working with basically, selling your DPI to the wider shore. If you do that, in the last case, you can also build also financial models to support, for example, that the government set up, or within the confines of government, you end up having, subsidized sort of operations, right? Basically, you can pay for the economy-wide use, actually for the public use. You don't have to basically make the citizens pay for the transactions they do with the government then, right? So that's the sort of models that I think have been employed, Estonia and elsewhere. These are the sort of elements that we, again, advise the governments to say, hey, have these as part of the package. Think about these sort of scaling and sort of financial model ways. Think how you can leverage other entities there, and you have to manage for that. It doesn't happen by itself, somehow accidentally.
Thank you so much. I've written so many points, I don't even know which one to bring up. But I really loved how you framed it, building DPI as a product. Yesterday, which was day 0 for some of the people who managed to make it, we did have a discussion around DPGs for DPI. And this really came out, like there's almost like a fear, or people are not really ready to go there, whereby we're building DPIs and positioning them as products. And it was interesting to see that in the room, everyone was saying the government also wants to hear this. Private sector wants to hear this. DPGs themselves wants to hear it. So just innovating around how do we start building DPI as products is a great conversation. And I welcome everyone to just talk about this a little bit more. And I would now turn to you again, Subhashni. And we spoke earlier today, and you were telling me how you really miss East Africa, which got me very excited because I'm from Tanzania, and you were telling me that currently you are based in Singapore. So I want to hear from you, what are some of the challenges you've seen when you look at these different markets, these different regions, just building off on the things that Sim brought up? Are there any specific challenges that you think we could either learn from each other in terms of regions, or are there areas that have particular problems that other areas could support?
Sure. So I think building on what Sim just brought up in terms of just scalability and sustainability, I think we all agree, right? Collaboration is great, partnership is good, and PPPs are good. And Nandan had a remark earlier this morning. He said, DPI expands markets. The challenge is I don't think we know the modalities that work to harness this expansion. And the context is so different, sort of country to country, right? So we really need some frameworks. I think some use cases, but also frameworks to guide on how we operationalize. And I think, Justin, you had a terrific point around if we just collate everything we're doing, so we're also doing a ton, and really we didn't think about them in sort of definitionally as DPGs, right? They've just been public goods that we've put out, but we haven't framed them so. But how do you roll all of that up and start plugging it in could be a good place to start. And I think we can draw inspiration from 2 different national payment systems, to your point, right? And at 2 ends of the world. PIX I already mentioned, but also what's happening in Thailand with PromptPay, I thought is a really interesting way of bringing both the regulator, the public sector, and the private sector together to very quickly set up a system that's working. And then tapping, again, sort of the cross-sector expertise to do cross-border collaboration. So I think that's really interesting and shows us that when we're intentional and we begin to sort of coalesce at the start in design, then we're able to bring about these coalition models that are effective to not only innovate, but also just use innovation that's already available to get to market more quickly and inclusively. So that's one I'll sort of give from two geographies. I think on data exchange, it's also important to note that like the complexity is the same, whether it's regulated or private sector led, right? Like in some markets, we're seeing that private sector is leading, managing that, investing in the infrastructure to kind of power those systems. And in other places where regulation is mandating, even there, I think it's important to have some sort of PPP model and understand what the incentives are for the private sector to play, because really, to your point, Sim, then sustainability just becomes the underlying question to all of this. And that even as the momentum builds, that remains a continuous worry, I think, for all of us this week. I talked earlier about the clarity on roles, but also I think it's important to maybe acknowledge a little bit more the distinctive value. I don't necessarily think we do that sufficiently. The accountability that civil society brings, or the role of regulators in ensuring good governance, but also protecting the vulnerable, but the private sector's deep understanding of how markets work and opportunities and challenges can help accelerate. And I think a little bit more sort of clarity around those roles, and acknowledging that everybody is committed to user-centric approaches. We need more of it, but we're all in this ultimately to serve the one citizen and the one consumer. So I think there's a ton of opportunity for co-investment and collaboration, but I'd call for more consultative approaches. So I think this summit is terrific from that perspective. I do think more consultative approaches are important, and open DPIs that allow for innovation to plug in and play quickly. That also, I think that will help us a long way. And the final point I'll make is all of this is great, but the establishment of trust-enforcing ecosystems is critical, right? And I do think in PPPs, private sector has a lot to offer in terms of just fraud detection, cybersecurity, data privacy, and we can't speak to these things enough. And I think to see more PPPs in that realm would be terrific.
Thank you so much. I think you brought up very, very insightful notes, and one of them you spoke of trust, and I think this would be a good time to then welcome Tamara. You have worked both in, I think, Europe and in the United States right now in public office, and most of the times when we are having discussions about collaboration, we often hear about how government and most of the offices become a little bit fearful. There's issues around sovereignty, there's issue around vendor lock-ins, etc. when it comes to building partnerships. So I just want to hear from you, what can we do more to build this partnership? And also an interesting conversation we had earlier where you said within every government, ahead of the ministers and ahead of some of the policy and decision makers, there are always those movers and shakers. There are always those people who are actually implementing. And a lot of DPI conversation has been focused on the policy makers and people who are making decisions, but we're not really bringing in the movers and shakers. So what ideas do you have around how we could bring those people? Do you know, some of their roles, what they do, and how can they support us to collaborate more and innovate more?
Thank you, Desire, and thank you all. All I'm gonna add on and build on insightful contribution from my panelists, really speaking from the perspective of a bureaucrat, a public servant, trying to drive this reform both in USA and Europe, and how my teams have leveraged this movement of DPI to really be a catalyst for this overall government transformation that Sim was talking about. How DPI has really helped us change the culture, the values, and principles of how government works, and how we leverage partnerships with private industry partners to strengthen the delivery muscle, the internal capacity to deliver. What I loved when I received the invitation to this summit is that both in the invitation and on the website, it said shared digital infrastructure is less about technology and more about people, and that has been said by all of my fellow panelists here and many of you. that tech is just a tool and not a solution, that all this work depends deeply on the people in this room and the culture of caring. My relationship with Sim from like 7 years ago has provided a runway for us in Montenegro and USA to learn a lot from their experience. So I just want to stress out how we talk about a lot about open source code and sharing open source code, but I think equally important, if not more, are documenting, codifying lessons learned, levers, strategies, plays, and hacks. I want to also give a shout out and thanks to another friend, James there from Public Digital, whom we partnered with when building Office of Digital Services in California, and we've learned a lot from their international experience. So throughout my journey, again, as passionate public servant and bureaucracy hacker, I had a privilege to work with amazing humans like Sim and James all around the world. In California state government, open data was really that tip of a spear and the catalyst to changing how government works. In 2010, California state government was the second government in the nation in USA to spearhead open data movement and beyond just being early adopters of some of the first DPGs like CCAN, open source platform. We started working in the open, also using the GitHub as well. We product manage on GitHub. But this was really a way for us to change the mindset of the public servants from the one that was focusing on scarcity, risks, and liabilities to the one that was more kind of leaning on opportunities and possibilities. And this is the space where we also relied on our private industry partners too. So the small and big wins of our open government movement in California, they paved the way for the executive order and a budget, and we started on this broader DPI implementation with the Office of Innovation and Office of Digital Services. We have formed a dedicated team, and then COVID hit. Governor Newsom has given a mandate to that team with help of, again, our partners from PD to implement a COVID-19 digital response. And COVID-19 pandemic underscored the importance of having a resilient and adaptable digital infrastructure. And so we pulled some of the best from private industry. This is where our relationship with private industry partners in terms of augmenting that capacity really was essential. We created a memorandums of understanding with Google, Mozilla, and other organizations, and pulled in experts, product managers, researchers on tours of duty and civic leave, and they worked shoulder to shoulder with our team to really move forward this COVID-19 digital response. Of course, we use GitHub to work in the open. Later on, we open sourced our COVID-19 vaccine record that was later implemented by several neighboring states. But even more popular were our COVID-19 crisis communication standard, plain language and translation guides, and insights from our user research. This is where, again, I want to stress out also how, in collaboration with our private industry partners, we were able to codify and document some of the learnings and standards and not just code and share with other neighbor countries. And so fast forward a year after that, I had an opportunity of a lifetime. After 30 years of the same party rule in my home country, Montenegro, the new government was forming. The prime minister was looking for experts. I was able to go back and to serve in my home country. Coming from the 5th largest economy in California, I knew that there will be some tools, methods, and approaches that we can also use in a small country of Montenegro. So this is why I love being in spaces like this every time I go back home with another tool or a hack that I can use back in my home country. As the first digital ministry in Montenegro, we had that air cover to approach building that delivery muscle, but I was met with a huge tech deficit and a super tiny budget. And so most immediately, we actually leaned on a lot of the learnings from Estonia. And in Montenegro's digital transformation strategy and policies, we paved a framework and roadmap for DPI approach to digitalization, focusing on cultivating foundational digital infrastructure. bridging a collaborative approach to software development and ultimately enabling a broader ecosystem to come along so that we can work as one team. One of the first opportunities to build upon this DPI approach was during COVID. We have leveraged EU digital COVID-19 certificate, providing everyone in Montenegro a quick test and vaccination record, their fingerprints. Other DPGs that we leveraged, we worked closely with our colleagues, friends from UK government when redesigning Montenegro's website to leverage their design standard, plain language guides. But even more valuably was collaboration with them to upskill our public servants with content design practices and other practices which they still continue to use. And other DPGs which we found very valuable and worked on was Notify, messaging platform, open opportunities collaboration platform. We sort of hacked from our USA federal government colleagues. And then we paid a visit to SIM and created an MOU with his government, trying to look into what it would look like to implement X-Roads in Montenegro. So we heavily relied not just on our government partners, but private industry partners to build this long-lasting governance and relationships. We had a major cyber attack which made Montenegro famous and has sadly left the whole system in shrivels. And this further illuminated the need, not just to folks inside of the government, but outside, the need for a robust cybersecurity measures. Our infrastructure wasn't optimized for security, and so this has helped me galvanize support around prioritizing cybersecurity in DPI development. And so just, again, stressing out the DPI's mission presents not only a huge opportunity to build collaboratively, software collaboratively, and solve thorny problems, but it also presents a huge opportunity for us to share those hacks and plays and tools and methods that has helped us hack bureaucracy and build better government. And so I guess I'll leave it to that, and looking forward to learning more from you as we move forward the next 2 days, sharing my hacks and learning from yours.
Thank you so much, Tamara. I think I have enjoyed very much this panel. I've also enjoyed working with each and every one of you. I know we wanted to give people a few minutes to ask questions, but because of the time delays, I'm going to have to say that we wrap it up. So I will do one special thing, though, before we close. But before I get there, I just want to thank each and every one of you. I appreciate your flexibility and also appreciate some of the insights you've shared. And as Tamara has put it, I think this conversation is perfectly placed starting today, because then you have met all the panelists, you understand some of the work they're doing, and I'm hoping that you'll get an opportunity to engage with each and every one of them. This morning I learned a new word which I will be using. I think it was during Nandan's presentation, and they mentioned roti, which I understand is an Indian bread, and they said that you can use it as return on time invested. Now, we have a number of people here who have really stuck by to listen to you, so I would ask you if you have one line, 2 minutes, 1 minute, just to share anything that you would like to leave them with, maybe where to find you, how can they have conversations with you, and also just sharing some of the panels or discussions that you would like to have. So we can just go by one, and we wrap it up after that. Thank you.
I leave with an invitation to just come up and chat. I'm here to learn and also figure out how we can partner. We're doing a bunch of stuff on research to fill evidence gaps and so much more. But the one line that I'd like to leave with is I think we need to come more around the table and talk rather than across the table. And so I just think the 500 people who are here for this summit is an excellent mix, as I've already discovered today. So come up and let's talk, and then we'll figure out the dots for partnership.
That's great. I'll build on that in the same way. If DPIs and DPGs are a movement, I think our message is certainly Microsoft, along with the partners up at this table, have joined that movement. Believe it or not, it's hard to understand how to best support countries and partners. It really is. And that's why we're here. We're trying to ask and answer that question. And so just to your point, getting around the table and having a dialogue so that we can understand how to be the most effective partner, the most responsible partner to all the countries and communities that we're serving, I think that would be my ask.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliantly put. I think this is really the most exciting time in global digital development, not just because of the speed, but the opportunities of innovation, the impacts that we're seeing on a social level, but also unbelievably ambitious governments. And I'm very fortunate I've got, two representatives sitting to my right and to listen to about your experiences in Montenegro, California, and Estonia. It's incredibly inspiring. I say that not as just a citizen that, has my own government, but just, someone who's excited about seeing digital development take off at scale, maximizing the good and minimizing some of the bad. And I love the example that you brought up of the cybersecurity in Montenegro. And I was just thinking of in Ukraine, a country that is often cited in these sorts of summits with their incredible DIA app, the government app that was mobily accessible to really access, with the ambition of the government, any public service would become digital. And so there's now dozens and dozens of different public services that run on this mobile app. And the government achieved a lot, but they can't do it all. And that's okay. The private sector is there, academia is there, civil society is there. There's so many other organizations that can come in. And even if you're an incredibly ambitious government, it's okay to come into partnerships and really do a lot for your citizens. So I'm very optimistic about the era that we find ourselves in.
We're really optimistic as well now that we're surrounded with such amazing humans who are supportive of each other. I just want to especially talk to the fellow public servants out there who are carrying like one of the hardest torches, that you're not alone, and what each of us can do to make sure that this work continues when we go back to our homes. I'm a part of several different organizations where we are intentionally cultivating these communities of practice, like apolitical digitality. Actually, just came back from Kiev, where we are working together with them to share a lot of their lessons learned. How might we be a part of each other's solutions? So when we go back home, we can continue to share not just the open source code, but how we hacked a specific problem that we wanted to solve. So I'm here if I can support and connect you with anyone that can help you solve any small or big problem that you have. And thank you to the public servants, thank you for all of the service that you are doing.
Well, from my end, I think that two possible approaches that have guided me as well as my country, I think are applicable. First of all, well, frankly, just start. So if it's the question about how to do it right, well, I mean, look, just start. We'll figure it out. I mean, exactly, the will is there, right? Whether it's how to do DPI or whether how to do partnerships in this space, right? So just starting, again, the coalitions will come together and the partnerships will flourish. Just start on that. But my second point is also just to say that, look, in many ways, like, copy what works. That's the whole idea of DPI, right? Also, let's say, like, copy what works. Let's put it in place in other places. But the same also when it comes to public-private partnerships or any sort of policy lessons, copy what works more. Let's not reinvent so many wheels as we do.
Yep. Thank you very much. I don't think I can possibly add anything on top of that. And I would like to thank you again, each and every one of you. So I'm happy that I hope everyone is inspired to start. Everyone is inspired to join the movement. Everyone is inspired to ask more questions and do more research. And I am looking forward for the next 3 days. And also want to thank each and every one of you for spending time with us today. Please reach out to our panelists if you have any further questions. And with that, we can wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
So, let's do it.